I never imagined Ethan Morgan, my husband of 10 years, could plunge to such a vile depth. Our marriage had been unraveling for years, his arrogance seeping into every argument like a slow poison, his need to control wrapping around me like a noose, his mocking jabs at my photography career slicing deeper each time he dismissed it as a cute little distraction, instead of the passion that kept me sane. But what he did in Italy wasn't just a crack in the facade. It was him dousing our life in gasoline, striking a match, and leaving me to burn while he sauntered off, laughing with his pack of hyenas. It began with a romantic trip to Tuscany, one I'd only agreed to after months of his relentless guilt-tripping about how we needed to reconnect. I'd packed my camera, hoping to capture the rolling hills and golden light, maybe even salvage a shred of the warmth we'd lost. By the third day, that hope was ash. The trip had morphed into a reunion with his college buddies, Pete, Marco, and their rowdy crew, turning Ethan into the puffed-up frat boy I'd always despised. That afternoon, we sat at a trattoria perched on a Tuscan hilltop, red and white checkered tablecloths fluttering in the breeze, vineyards stretching out below, bathed in sunlight that could have been ripped from a travel brochure. I'd envisioned a quiet lunch, a fleeting chance to bridge the gulf between us. Instead, they were 3 bottles of Chianti deep, their laughter shifting from boisterous to barbed, cutting through the warm air like a jagged blade. I tried to keep the peace, sipping my wine, pasting on a smile even as my stomach twisted with unease. I'd learned to tiptoe around Ethan's ego over the years, a survival skill honed through countless nights of biting my tongue. But by the 3rd bottle, I'd hit my limit. "Ethan, let's head back to the hotel," I said, keeping my tone light, careful not to spark the minefield of his pride. He rolled his eyes, slumping back with a dramatic groan. "Goddamn, Lillian, don't be such a buzzkill," he snapped, his voice thick with wine and irritation, his lips curling in that familiar sneer I'd come to dread. Pete grinned, clapping Ethan's shoulder with a loud smack that echoed over the table. "Yeah, man, don't let her slap a leash on you. She's already got you whipped." That was it. 10 years of swallowing their garbage, of shrinking myself to fit Ethan's world, of enduring their snickers while he tore me down. It all erupted in a surge of white-hot fury. I shoved my chair back, the screech of metal against stone piercing the trattoria's hum, and stormed out, my sandals hammering the cobblestones with every furious step. The uneven stones bit into my soles, sending sharp jolts up my legs. But I didn't care. I needed out, away from their sneers, away from Ethan's suffocating presence. I half expected him to follow, not to apologize. He hadn't done that since our 3rd anniversary, when he bought me roses after a screaming match only to toss them in the trash the next day, but at least to keep up the pretense of a husband who gave a damn. He did follow, but what came next wasn't reconciliation. It was a cold, deliberate stab in the back. He caught up by the rental car, parked haphazardly on the narrow street, his breath sour with wine, his eyes glinting with a malice that stopped me cold. "Your purse has your passport, right?" he slurred, his voice dripping with mockery, each word a venomous jab. "Good. You're so freaking smart, figure it out." Before I could process the cruelty, he climbed into the driver's seat, his buddies piling in after him, their cackles spilling out of the open windows like a pack of scavengers reveling in a fresh kill. The engine roared, and the car peeled down the street, tires screeching against the pavement, kicking up a cloud of dust that stung my eyes and clung to my skin like a second layer of betrayal. I stood there, rooted, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. A shaky, half-hysterical laugh slipped out. This had to be a sick joke, right? He'd drive around, come back with that smug grin, and we'd scream until one of us gave in like always. But 10 minutes ticked by, slow and torturous, the seconds stretching into an eternity. Then 30. An hour. The sun sank behind the hills, staining the sky a violent crimson that mirrored the storm brewing inside me, and reality crashed in like a runaway train. He wasn't coming back. I yanked my phone from my purse, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it, and dialed his number. Straight to voicemail, his smug recorded voice taunting me like a slap. 27 calls later, my thumb hovering over the screen, I fired off a text. Where are you? This isn't funny. Delivered. The screen mocked, but no response came. Then the final blow. Blocked. Not just Ethan, Pete, Marco. Every one of them had severed me from their lives like I was a punchline they'd already forgotten. My phone buzzed, 5% battery, and I clutched it tighter, as if it could anchor me to a world slipping away. Fury roared through me, burning away the shock. How dare he? 10 years of bending over backward for his fragile ego, of letting him chip away at my dreams, my independence, and he ditched me in a country where I couldn't even ask for help, with 80 euros, a dying phone, and nothing else. But beneath the rage, a tiny ember flickered, small, defiant, refusing to die. I wasn't broken, not if I didn't let him win. Abandoned. The moment I knew it was over. The Trattoria's chatter faded as I wandered into a maze of cobblestone streets, lost in a town I couldn't name, a postcard blur I'd been too distracted to pin down. My purse dangled from my shoulder. 80 euros in cash, $37 in crumpled US bills I'd forgotten about, my passport in its worn sleeve, and a phone clinging to 2%, the screen dimming with every heartbeat. No credit cards, no debit card. I'd handed them to Ethan that morning when my tiny clutch wouldn't zip, trusting him with a casual ease I'd perfected over a decade, like the naive idiot he'd shaped me into with every cutting remark. My mind raced, replaying our marriage in jagged flashes, Ethan snickering at my gallery openings like they were a child's art show, pressuring me to quit my job for his dinners, isolating me from friends who saw through him. I'd lost so many to his jealousy, but not Claire. I remembered calling her at 2 a.m. once, sobbing after he'd called my photos worthless trash. She'd stayed on the line, her voice soft, steady. You deserve better, Lil. Don't let him break you. I'd clung to that, to her, like a lifeline, never imagining she'd been waiting to twist the knife. Panic clawed at my throat, sharp and bitter, but I forced it down, nails digging into my palms until they left crescent marks. Think, Lillian. I started walking, sandals slapping the uneven stones. The town settled into dusk, shutters clattered shut, Italian voices murmured words I couldn't decipher, wine glasses clinked as cafes closed. An ATM glowed ahead, a beacon in the shadows. I fumbled with my phone, battery blinking red, and pulled up our joint account, fingers slipping as my pulse thundered. Locked. I tried again, cursing under my breath. Then it refreshed, and my breath stopped, a ragged gasp caught in my chest. 0 balance. Not just locked, emptied. Our savings, my photography earnings I'd fought to keep separate, the emergency fund I'd insisted on all gone. Then worse, overdraft. 15,000 euros. A loan, 6 months old. My name scrawled in a jagged, unfamiliar signature, forged, a betrayal etched in ink that chilled my blood. My knees wobbled as it sank in. Ethan hadn't just abandoned me. He'd gutted me financially, drained every resource, saddled me with debt, all while I'd played the dutiful wife, blind to the trap he'd set. My phone flickered, 1%, and died, the screen blackening with a pitiful beep. No money beyond the scraps in my purse, a 15,000 euro noose tightening around my neck, and a town growing menacing. Cafes shuttered, locals casting wary glances at the disheveled American stumbling through their streets, her breaths fogging the cool air in shallow bursts. I was invisible, sinking, broke beyond broke. Then I saw it. A pawn shop, its neon sign buzzing faintly, casting a sickly green glow across the cobblestones. My wedding ring, 2 carats Ethan had upgraded on our 5th anniversary, not for love but to flaunt, felt heavier than ever, a shackle I'd worn too long. I twisted it off, the metal biting my skin, and held it up, the stone catching the last light with a defiant sparkle. This wasn't just survival, it was war. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and stale smoke. The pawnbroker, grizzled with a cigarette dangling from his lip, barely glanced up from his yellowed newspaper. I slammed the ring on the counter, the clink echoing in the cramped space. How much? I demanded, voice hard. He squinted through a scratched magnifying glass, weighed it on a creaky scale. Nice piece, he muttered, accent thick. Euro, 400. It was worth thousands. Ethan had bragged about the price, but I had no leverage. Fine, I snapped. He counted out crisp euros, and I snatched them, shoving them into my purse with a rustle that sounded like defiance. I walked out, the night air slapping my flushed skin. No ring. No husband. Just 400 euros and a fight I wasn't ready to lose. Pawned and powerless, my desperate escape. The bus station was a grimy hellhole, dented benches scattered across cracked concrete, flickering lights buzzing overhead, a ticket board smeared with destinations I couldn't parse. I swayed on unsteady legs, staring at the options Rome, Venice, Florence, then saw Athens. My finger hovered over Dad's contact, the screen a faint glow at 1%. One call, and he'd wire cash, get me home to Boston by tomorrow, safe in my old bedroom with coffee, while he untangled Ethan's mess. But then what? Ethan at the airport, arms crossed, smirking. Had your tantrum, huh? He drawled, dragging me back to a torched life, that dead noose he'd tighten whenever he pleased. My jaw clenched, a growl rumbling in my throat. No way in hell. I marched to the ticket window, facing a woman with tired eyes and a faded scarf. Athens, I said, sliding euros across, voice steady despite my shaking hands. She handed me a worn ticket, its edges curling, and I gripped it like a lifeline. The journey was a brutal blur, overcrowded buses rattling over potholed roads, seats sticky with grime, the air thick with diesel and sweat. Ferries pitched on choppy waves, churning my empty stomach until bile burned my throat. Sleepless nights in waiting rooms followed, floors littered with cigarette butts, the sour tang of desperation heavy in the air. My cash dwindled, a stale croissant crumbling in my hands, a lukewarm water bottle from a vending machine that ate my coins and spat out plastic slosh. My phone died between Brindisi and the Ionian Sea, leaving me adrift among strangers who didn't glance my way. The last bus shuddered to a stop in a dusty Greek village, and I stumbled off, a hollowed-out wreck, legs jelly, stomach gnawing, head throbbing. The air hit, salty, warm, thick with sun-scorched stone and sea brine, jolting me awake. The village was hushed, locals setting up market stalls under a pale dawn sky. I wandered, vision blurring, freedom surging in my chest, wild and terrifying, but my body betrayed me. Dizziness slammed in, a sledgehammer to the skull. My knees buckled, and I hit the dirt hard, palms stinging, the world spinning into a haze of olive trees and blinding sun before black swallowed me. I jolted awake, gasping, a firm voice slicing through. Kyria? Fosmau. Rough hands patted my cheeks. I squinted into sunlight, head pounding. A woman hovered, lined face, kind eyes framed by deep crinkles, silver hair and a tight bun. She pressed a dented canteen to my lips. Water, she said, English thick and halting. I drank greedily, choking, the coolness spilling down my chin and soaking my shirt, shocking me alert. Elena, she said, tapping her chest. Lillian, I rasped, pointing weakly at myself. She nodded, her gaze piercing but warm, cutting through my exhaustion. She saw me, lost, shattered, and wouldn't let me fall apart. Not here. From despair to a new beginning. Elena hauled me to my feet, her small frame wiry and tough, and half-carried me down a dusty path to a stone farmhouse nestled among olive groves, their gnarled branches stretching like ancient guards. Inside smelled of rosemary, fresh bread, and earth, a stark contrast to the sterile life I'd left with Ethan. Dmitri, her husband, stepped in, oil-stained hands wiping on a rag, silver mustache framing a stern face that softened as he took me in. Elena rattled off Greek, her tone firm yet kind. He grunted, nodded, no questions, just acceptance. They sat me at a scarred wooden table, scratched with years of use, and slid over lentils and crusty bread. I tore into it, hunger overriding dignity, the warmth spreading through my hollow stomach like a lifeline. The lentils were simple, salt and herbs, but tasted like survival. The bread's rough crust cracked under my fingers, its soft center melting on my tongue. I finished, scraping the bowl, and stumbled to a cot in a tiny room, collapsing under a quilt smelling of lavender and dust. Exhaustion dragged me under. No dreams of Ethan's sneers, just an owl's hoot and the house's creak lulling me into oblivion. Morning light streamed through shutters, painting golden stripes across the stone floor. A faded blue dress and scuffed sandals sat at the bed's foot, my designer outfit gone, and I didn't care. I pulled them on, the fabric rough but honest, and shuffled downstairs. Elena pressed a chipped mug of bitter coffee into my hands, steam curling up.
Stay. Rest.
Eat, she said, warm but firm, leaving no room for protest. I wanted to fight, to reclaim control, but my body was too drained. I stayed. Days later, she handed me a basket and jerked her chin toward the grove. Work. I followed, the sun fierce, heat clinging to my skin. She raked olives into nets with swift grace. I flailed, snagging branches, nearly hitting myself. Dmitri muttered grumpily, kicking dirt, but Elena chuckled a low, warm sound and adjusted my grip. Again. I kept at it, sweat stinging my eyes, muscles screaming, until olives thudded into the net. Messy, but mine. My hands blistered, back ached, but I didn't stop. That night, over coffee, Elena spoke softly of her son, lost to a fishing boat in a storm, how these trees stitched her heart back together. Dmitri showed me fence mending next day, grumbling at my bent nails, but nodding when I pounded one straight, the hammer's weight solid in my grip. The village noticed me, wary glances at first, then a thaw. A warm loaf appeared on the steps one morning. A kid waved shyly at the market. An old man tipped his cap as I hauled olives. I wasn't Ethan's wife here, just Lillian, and it felt like waking up after a decade-long sleep. One dusk, I wandered to the grove alone, sinking beneath an olive tree, its trunk rough against my back. The wind whispered through leaves, carrying earth and salt, and my chest loosened. No panic, just peace settling into my bones. I was whole, reclaiming myself. Weeks bled into one another, roughening my hands, tanning my skin to bronze, building muscle from farm work, sorting olives until my fingers cramped, pressing oil in a creaky machine, chasing chickens that darted underfoot. The old me, Ethan's manicured trophy, would have recoiled at the dirt, the sweat, the ache. She was gone, replaced by someone who fought for every callus, every small victory. One afternoon, Elena led me to a cluttered office, yellowed ledgers stacked high, an ancient computer humming sickly. "You help?" she asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "Yeah," I said, throat tight with gratitude. I dove in, untangling decades of scribbled numbers, sketching oil labels with my photographer's eye, rustic, bold, elegant. I haggled in broken Greek with restaurant owners, heart pounding as I tripped over words, spine stiffening with each deal closed. This was mine, built from grit, not Ethan's game. Nikos, a tall villager with scarred hands, brought firewood one morning. "Good work," he said, nodding at my nets, respect plain in his low voice. He'd linger, whittling a bird or spoon, asking about my designs with quiet curiosity. "You see clear," he said once, holding a sketch, his eyes meeting mine without judgment. Unlike Ethan's control, Nikos offered equality, a reminder of respect after years of its absence. One evening, Elena slid an envelope across the table. My first pay, euros earned through sweat. My fingers shook, not a handout, but freedom forged from Ethan's ashes. Alone, quilt around me, I wondered, am I happier? His shadow lingered, but under that tree, I'd found peace. Now, I felt power, a strength he'd never sparked. Then an email shattered it. "Lillian, I've tracked you to that Greek shithole. Tantrums over. I land in Athens Thursday. Be ready."
Ethan.
Rage roared through me, white hot. I slammed my phone down, screen cracking. "He's coming," I said, fists clenched. Elena fetched a partnership agreement, my name beside hers and Dimitri's, a stake in this farm. "You have home," she said, voice like steel. "He don't decide." I clutched at my anchor. The final confrontation. Thursday dawned too calm, the sky a mocking blue above the olive grove. I was in the processing shed with Dimitri, dipping a chunk of bread into a bowl of fresh-pressed olive oil, its sharp, green taste grounding me as the earthy scent filled the air, a small ritual that steadied my nerves. Then a silver rental car roared up the dirt road, tires crunching gravel with an aggressive snarl that set my teeth on edge and sent adrenaline spiking through my veins. Ethan stepped out, looking absurdly out of place in his crisp white button-down and tailored chinos, his lip curled in disgust as he surveyed the farmhouse like it was a stain on his polished world. His eyes landed on me, stronger, sun-darkened, a woman he didn't recognize, and he froze, his smug mask slipping for a split second, revealing a flicker of unease before it hardened into the arrogance I knew too well. "Jesus Christ, Lillian," he spat, his voice thick with disdain as he recovered, stepping closer with a swagger that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. "What the hell happened to you? You look like some filthy peasant." "Life happened," I said, wiping my hands on my apron, a cold, hard smile tugging at my lips as I met his gaze without flinching, my voice steady and sharp, honed by months of resilience. "Enough of this bullshit," he snapped, shaking off the shock and closing the distance, his polished shoes scuffing the dirt as he loomed over me. "You've had your little rebellion, playtime's over. Pack your crap, we're going home." "This is my home," I shot back, my voice cutting through his bluster like a blade, unwavering despite the pulse hammering in my chest. He laughed, a sharp, bitter bark that grated on my nerves and echoed across the grove. "This dump? You think you're some big shot now? I left you in Italy to teach you a lesson. You were suffocating me, always whining about your stupid little photos, dragging me down. I cleaned out the account, took every penny you had, even signed you up for that €15,000 loan to make sure you'd stay broken. You're nothing without me, broke, indebted, finished." "You're wrong," I said, stepping forward, closing the gap as I shoved a stack of divorce papers into his hands, the edges creased from my sweaty grip. "You didn't break me. You set me free, and I'm not going anywhere with you." His face drained of color, his eyes darting over the pages as his hands shook slightly, but he recovered fast, his sneer twisting into something uglier, more desperate. "You think these dirtbag farmers are gonna save you?" he snarled, his voice rising to a shout that cracked with rage, spittle flying from his lips. "I'll drag you back myself if I have to. I own you, Lillian." He lunged, grabbing my arm with a bruising grip, his fingers digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks, yanking me toward him with a force that made my shoulder scream in protest. Dimitri loomed beside me in an instant, a wall of quiet fury, his broad shoulders squared, arms crossed tight over his chest, his presence a silent threat that made the air thrum with tension. Elena stormed out of the house, her eyes blazing like she'd burn him alive with a single look, her small frame radiating a fierceness that seemed to shake the ground beneath her. Then, from the grove, villagers emerged, slowly at first, then in a steady stream. The baker with flour-dusted hands clenched into fists, the cheesemaker with a scowl etched deep into his weathered face, the old lady who'd slipped me herbs at the market leaning on her cane but staring Ethan down with a glare that could cut steel, and Nikos, standing tall with a quiet strength, his dark eyes locked on Ethan with calm intensity. They didn't speak, didn't need to, just stood there, a solid line of strength I'd earned through sweat and time, a community that had claimed me when I had nothing left. Ethan's grip faltered, his confidence cracking under the weight of their silent judgment, his hand loosening as he stepped back, his breath hitching. "Fine," he spat, shoving me away so hard I stumbled, catching myself against the shed wall with a grunt, my palms scraping the rough wood. "Rot here. You'll regret it when you're 60, broke, and still scraping olives like some filthy peasant. I made sure of that with every dime I took." I straightened, brushing dirt from my hands, and met his gaze with a smile, slow, sharp, and lethal, a blade forged in the fire he'd tried to burn me with. "Better a peasant with pride than a king in ruins," I said, my voice low but cutting, each word a hammer strike to his crumbling ego. Enjoy the ashes, Ethan. Everything you built is dust now, and I'm the one still standing. His jaw clenched, his face flushing a mottled red as the words landed, his hands balling into fists at his sides, but he had no retort, no defense. The villagers' stares bore into him, and for the first time, I saw it, a flicker of realization in his eyes, the dawning truth that he'd lost control, that his power over me had evaporated. He opened his mouth, then shut it, his sneer twisting into something pathetic, a wounded animal lashing out one last time. "Oh, and your camera gear?" he hissed, voice trembling with spite as he tossed his final grenade. "Sold it all. Every lens, every tripod, every piece of your precious art. Paid for this trip with it, and damn, it felt good." The words hit like a fist, knocking the air from my lungs in a ragged gasp. My Nikon, my lenses, the tools of my soul, gone, turned into petty cash for his revenge. Fury surged, a red-hot wave that curled my fists so tight my nails drew blood, my vision narrowing as I took a step toward him, ready to claw that smugness off his face. But Elena grabbed my wrist, her touch firm and grounding, holding me back as my control frayed. Then the car door clicked open, and the twist came, a blow sharper than anything he'd thrown. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, dripping in designer labels, her heels stabbing the gravel with impatient clicks. I froze, breath catching. Claire, my college friend, my rock through Ethan's coldest nights, the one who'd held me together when I'd fallen apart. She crossed her arms, glaring at Ethan with a scowl that could strip paint. "You said she'd be gone by now, Ethan," she snapped, her voice icy and cutting. "I told you to drain the accounts and ditch her in Italy, cleanly. I'm done waiting for you to grow a spine and finish this." The world tilted, my stomach plummeting as her words sank in like shards of glass. Claire, my Claire, who'd sat with me at 2 a.m., wiping my tears after Ethan's venom, promising I deserved better, hadn't just betrayed me. She'd planned it, whispered the steps in his ear, helped him strip me bare and leave me for dead. Her eyes flicked to me, cold and unrepentant, no trace of the friend I'd trusted with my soul. "You always were too naive, Lil," she said, her voice ablade, twisting deeper. "He was mine long before you noticed. It didn't just cut, it shattered me, the pieces grinding into dust under the weight of her calculated cruelty." Ethan's betrayal had been brutal, but hers was a masterpiece of deception, a wound so raw it stole my breath. Yet that pain ignited a fire, a blaze roaring through the wreckage, burning away the last threads of who I'd been. I turned to the villagers, voice ringing out, trembling with rage and resolve. "Meet Ethan Morgan," I said, gesturing at him. "The bastard who ruined me, stole everything, left me for dead in Italy with nothing but debt." And Claire, I locked eyes with her, her flinch feeding my defiance, my friend who plotted it all, who smiled while she helped him bury me. The baker spat in the dirt, a wet thud of disgust. The cheesemaker snorted, arms tightening. The old lady muttered in Greek, venom dripping from her tone, and Dimitri's rare smirk deepened into something almost proud. Ethan's face flushed a furious red, his hands balling as he yanked Claire back to the car, her heels skidding in the gravel as she stumbled after him. "You're nothing," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation, the engine roaring as they peeled out, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a shroud long after they were gone, a testament to his retreat, his defeat. Elena slipped her hand into mine, her grip warm and solid, grounding me as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving me shaky but standing. "Now we work," she said, her voice light but firm, a quiet promise woven into the words, a vow that this was my place now. He was gone, his dirty secret, Claire's cold, complicit heart, laid bare, his power shattered into dust and carried away on the wind. And that final blow, "Enjoy the ashes, Ethan," had landed true, a strike he couldn't counter, a mirror held up to the ruin he'd become. I'd already won. Not just survived, but fought my way back from the edge he'd pushed me to, stronger than he could ever imagine. 1 year later, a year later, I sat in a seaside cafe, the Aegean sparkling beyond, a white sundress hugging my frame. Simple, mine. A woman slid a contract over. Distribution for my oil in U.S. chains. "You've built something incredible," she said. I signed. The pen scratched a victory hymn. Outside, the breeze lifted my hair. Then I saw him, Ethan, slumped at a corner table, wrinkled and unshaven, a half-empty wineglass before him. His eyes met mine, shock, shame flickering. He gripped the glass, but didn't move. I held his gaze. The man who'd broken me, now diminished, not destroyed but humbled. I smiled, small, final, nodded once, and walked away, contract in my bag, sandals clicking toward the sea. He didn't follow. The past was dust, and I was unstoppable. Hey, stick around for more. Holy hell, what a ride, right? Lillian's story is a gut punch of betrayal, grit, and that jaw-dropping twist with Ethan's side piece. Talk about a mic drop. If you're hooked on tales of badass comebacks, heart-wrenching surprises, and folks rising from the ashes, hit that subscribe button. We're dropping stories like this every week, and trust me, you 1256T want to miss what's next. Join the crew. Let's keep this wild ride going together.